My name is Rick Hanetho. I am the Executive Director of the Northbrook Park District in Northbrook, Illinois. Northbrook is a suburb about 25 miles directly north of Chicago. Grew up in Palatine, Illinois, which is a little bit west of there. I've been in the industry for about 25 years. Hopefully today is going to provide all of you with some insight on what it takes to create a truly great place to work. And I will certainly attempt to share some of my experience in working in not so great places and a little bit about my journey as the executive director at Northbrook. And I've been there about 3.5 years now. I started on April 1st, April Fool's Day of 2008. But the other thing that I try to weave into my presentations is that there's a very personal side to this as well. So today is about creating a great place to work, but one of the things I'd like you to think about as we talk about a great place to work and what that means and what it looks like and what it feels like, you can certainly apply a lot of this to your home life. And I think we'd all agree in our society today, the lines between work and play or work and home are very, very gray. Certainly with the advent of the smartphone and Blackberries, iPhones, whatever device you have, we can't seem to get away from work. So before I get into the presentation, I just want to share with you a quick story. And it's one of those things that, how many folks in the room are parents? Almost everyone. And those of you who aren't, there's a good chance at some point you will be. So on Monday of this week, I'm getting ready to come down here. A lot to finish, a lot to plan. We have a lot going on in our organization right now. We have committee meetings with our board on Monday night. So I have staff getting ready for those meetings. We're in the final stages of acquiring a 6-acre parcel of property that's been involved in negotiations for 2.5 years. And it's been highly stressful and very difficult and a lot going on. Coming off a holiday weekend, I get in my car after work and I have a voicemail from my son. And he's 16 and he says, "Call me, Dad, I want to talk." So I call him and I'm like, "So what's up, Blake?" And he says, "Dad, when you get home, can we talk?" I said, "Well, yeah. You want to give me a heads up? What? You're 16. We got problems here. What's?" So he's like, "No, I just want to talk." So I get home and I have a freshman stepson and an 8th grade daughter. So we got 13, 14, and 16. So the house can be a little bit chaotic. So Blake says, "Well, let's go talk." So we go up to our master bedroom, and he basically says, "Dad, I feel like I'm losing my connection with you." I'm like, "Whoa, Blake, what's up?" He's like, "Well, I went through a divorce, a lot going on, and I've always gone out of my way to stay connected to both of my kids. And one of the things you'll hear me talk about today is journaling. Those of you who know me or have known about me, I keep journals at work, I keep journals at home. If there's that one thing you take away today, go out and buy yourself a journal, keep it for work, start it at home. They're invaluable." So I start talking to Blake, and this is really terrible for me to say, but 5 years ago on Monday, my mother died of pancreatic cancer. I totally forgot about it. And he put on his Facebook page, "Grandma, rest in peace. You were like a second mom to me." So this was all about my 16-year-old son wanting to reconnect with his dad and make sure that I'm still there. And we ended up having the most incredible talk. And one of the things I said to him is I said, "Blake, there's one thing I've learned in my life, and that's the greatest opportunity to learn, the greatest opportunity to grow is when you're faced with the greatest adversity. So the biggest mistakes you make in life are your biggest opportunities? And he said, Dad, I just don't want to disappoint you. I said, Blake, you're going to make mistakes. You know, the reality is when you make a mistake, what do you learn? You know, that's the time you look in the mirror the most, because the only one that can fix it is you. And it was funny because then he says, God, that's exactly what I just started reading today. He started reading this book, Drew Brees. It's like an autobiography, and it's how Drew Brees overcame adversity. So it was one of those moments, and I can tell you, and those of you who have teenagers know this for certain, it's not always easy, can be exceptionally challenging, but I'll tell you what happened on Monday night was totally unexpected, but it's one of those moments that I'll never forget. When your 16-year-old tells you that you've been the most influential person in their lives. So, you know, today we're going to talk about leadership, we're going to talk about strategy, we're going to talk about culture, and it's going to be about work. It's going to be about your organization, your life. But just remember, there's transferable information that you can take and apply to your personal life. Okay, let's get started. Some things to think about. If you have a piece of paper, I'd like you to just write these questions down. How good do you want to be? How good is good enough? This one I'd like you, if you could take about a minute and a half to do right now. Describe your current work culture in 3 words. Take about 1 minute. Anybody willing to share? Got one in the back here? I'm sorry? Friendly, safe family. Right here? Challenging, diversifying, satisfying. Very good. First-class service. These are all very positive. Anybody willing to share one that's not so positive? Got one in the back? Chaotic but dedicated. So chaos can be a good thing. There's actually, there's a couple of folks, I think, in the audience from the organization that I worked for prior to coming to Northbrook. And I will also talk a little bit about the culture that I came to in Northbrook when I started. So I won't ask anyone to kind of shed their feelings about a perhaps a little less than perfect workplace, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Next one. What do you want to be doing in 5 years? What do you want to accomplish in the next 5 years? And the last one is, what is different about you? Why should we trust you? What is different about you, and why should we trust you? So, taking back to my journey and looking at where I was a little over 3 years ago as the deputy director of the Carroll Stream Park District in Illinois, I was very much excited about someday getting the opportunity to lead an organization. And I felt I was ready. I just needed the right opportunity. And at the time, there were 4 different jobs open, 4 different communities looking for an executive director. I did my research. I went out. I felt like I prepared as best I could. I said, if I just get an opportunity to interview, I think I can do this. I'm confident. I'm ready. So I only applied for Northbrook. There was something about the way they put together their recruitment profile that I felt like it was a good match for me. Well, fortunately, I went through the process and I got an offer. And one of the things you'll learn about me as I go through this presentation, I'm going to share with you a number of resources, a number of books that I've read throughout my career that have been exceptionally beneficial for me in learning techniques and tools that can help in a leadership capacity, in a planning capacity, in an organizational development capacity. So I got the offer, and the first thing I did is I went out and bought this book. You're in charge, now what? The 8-point plan. And I'll tell you what, you don't have to be the lead administrator of your organization to benefit from reading this book. It's a short book, it's only a couple hundred pages long, but it's filled with great tools. In fact, I'll share with you one of the resources in my presentation that you can use with your team and your staff to really look at how you build a work culture that's based on performance, based on results, and based on creating a really great place to work. Again, if you can't see that title, the title of the book is You're in Charge, Now What? If you Google it, it'll come up on Amazon. It's only, I think it's like $13. It's really cheap. So, as I mentioned earlier, today we're going to talk about really what I see are the 3 primary things that come into play when you're talking about creating a great place to work. And that's leadership, strategic clarity, and culture. So, leadership, it starts with you. And one of my favorite lines I've ever heard on leadership is from a guy named Peter Senge. Has anyone heard of Peter Senge? He wrote The Fifth Discipline. He's a professor at MIT. I was fortunate enough to go to a 3-day workshop in Portland, Oregon that Peter Senge led, and the guy's incredible. From a leadership standpoint and an organizational development standpoint, I certainly have never come across a book or author or individual that's been more impressive to me. But Peter talks about how leadership is intensely personal, yet profoundly collective. And for a relatively simple guy like me, that means to me that it's all about you, but not at all about you. Because fundamentally, when you become a leader, it's about growing the people around you. It's about putting the people around you in a position to be successful. It's one of the things I talked about at length when I started in Northbrook, is my goal is to see that each and every one of the people in this room is successful. And if success means you leaving the organization to achieve a greater level of success, that's the greatest compliment I could receive. Leadership fundamentally is about growing people around you. So these are some additional resources. Don't worry about writing all these down. Again, I'll get you the handout. John Maxwell is great. You've probably heard all his books, 360-Degree Leadership, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Jack Welch is one of my personal favorites. His book, The 4 E's of Leadership, and the book Winning are outstanding. Larry Winget, has anyone ever heard of Larry Winget? If you like humorous reading on leadership and personal growth, the guy's great. One of his books is Shut Up, Stop Whining, and Get a Life. Really, really great author. The other one I'll mention is Tom Rath. How many of you have heard of Strength Finders? A few people in the room. Again, that's a great one to Google. They do, if you buy the book, you actually can go through their leadership assessment process. And it's basically you get a report on what your primary strengths are as a leader. And it's all based on focusing on people's strengths as opposed to their weaknesses. Great tool. We're actually starting a leadership academy in Illinois for recreation professionals. And we're going to be using the Strength Finders model as our kickoff to the Leadership Academy. So we're really, really looking forward to that. So what are some of the traits of good leaders? First and foremost, leaders relentlessly upgrade their teams. As I just said, leadership is all about growing others. Every opportunity you have to make a change within your team, someone leaves, you're going to be in a position to hire someone, you have to treat that with great care. You have to look at every opportunity as an opportunity to reallocate resources in an effort to add value to your team and to the customers you ultimately serve. Leaders make sure their people see, live, and breathe the vision. We're going to be talking about strategy a little later in the presentation. We're going to talk about a little bit about mission, a little bit about vision, a little bit about guiding principles, strategic planning, and effective leaders ensure that the mission, the vision, the core values, guiding principles, whatever you call them, in the strategic plan, every aspect of the organization, every decision that is made, every job description that's written is based on the mission, the vision, the guiding principles, the strategic plan of the organization. It's walking the walk, it's talking the talk, it's making it real every day. From Jack Welch, leaders possess the 3 E's. I reduced it by one. Jack Welch adds edge to it. I don't exactly like the way he words it, so I took it out. Energy energizes and executes. You could throw in passion as a P to those 3 E's, that really effective leaders always have an intense passion for what they do. Leaders establish and build trust. I think if I could underline and bold one word in this, it would be trust. Trust is the backbone of any organization. When we talk about culture, when we talk about leadership, when we talk about strategy, if you don't earn trust in your organization, you will fail every time. And by building trust, they do it with candor, transparency, and recognition. Candor is critical. I've worked for a couple of bosses in my career that were extremely direct. In some cases, I would even say confrontational. And that can be really uncomfortable for a guy like me. But I'll tell you one thing, as much as it made me uncomfortable from time to time, I knew where I stood. Now, there's ways you can deal with being direct, with candor, that are not confrontational and not in your face. But I'll tell you, you go back to this trust issue, and if you're in a leadership role and you're not willing to confront the brutal facts, it's not going to work. Sometimes you have to be put in a position to make a really, really difficult decision. And one of the barometers that I use, or have used in the past, when I'm faced with what I think is going to be an exceptionally difficult position, I look in the mirror and I write stuff down. I write it in my journal. What's right for me? What's right for the individual or the stakeholder group that I'm about to make a decision on? And what's right for the organization? What are the pros and cons for the decision? What are the potential outcomes? And when I come to a conclusion, what I think is best primarily for the organization and the people we serve, that's a decision I go with. And you know what? Sometimes it's not comfortable, but you have to do it. Transparency is key. A lot of the old command control style of leadership is decisions were made in a vacuum. And I very much like and think the culture that works, that leads to building a great place to work, is when decisions are made cross-functionally, when there's collaboration, when people feel like they have input into critical decisions, no matter where they sit within the organization. As I've already said, leaders have the courage to confront the brutal facts and make difficult decisions. It's one of my favorites of all time. Leaders incessantly ask why. Share with you a quick story. Those of you who have heard it, I'm sorry, I have to tell it. Ask why. Peter Senge talks about a simple tool you can use in any organization that will help you make better decisions. It's called the 5 whys. And the best story I've ever heard, I was sitting in a conference, I can't even remember which one, but the speaker told this story about the 5 whys. It had to do with one of the monuments in Washington, and there was a board that was overseeing the repair of this monument, and there happened to be a systems thinker on the board. So it was a concrete repair, and the systems thinker knew the 5 whys, and he said, before we approve this $250,000 concrete repair on the monument, why don't we find out why the concrete is deteriorating? And they said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So they went out there and they evaluated the monument, and what they learned is, to make a long story short, there was lighting on the monument, and the lighting was attracting insects. And the lighting was set at the perfect level that these insects were reproducing every 24 hours. So it was infested with insects. And the insects attracted birds. And these birds would come and just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat. And what do birds do after they eat? Well, they make little bird droppings. And these bird droppings were landing on the concrete, and the content of the droppings was deteriorating the concrete. So because this systems thinker, this guy that used the 5 whys, was sitting on the board, yeah, they had to repair the concrete, but they replaced the lights, got rid of the insects, got rid of the birds, and now they're not going to have to make that same repair 3 to 5 years down the road. So in your organization, learn to ask why. Oftentimes we look to put Band-Aid solutions on many problems in our organizations that are way deeper rooted in the culture. You have to be willing to probe. Leaders recognize that leadership development should be a top priority. It's one of the reasons I got so involved with the state of Illinois in developing this leadership academy, is that I'm scared. I'm scared about what the future holds for public employees. I recently talked with the individual that led the recruitment for the Northbrook Park District. She does public sector recruiting across the country for village managers, fire chiefs, police chiefs, school superintendents, and parks and recreation directors. And she told me fundamentally, across our country, and it's not just public sector work, it's in every industry, there is a tremendous leadership gap in our country. We are not developing leaders. And in some ways, you could say we're developing robots. People that watch Fox or MSNBC and they believe what they see on TV, they believe what they read in the papers, and they just function on a day-to-day basis without any vision or desire to change the future. You know, when you're involved in a crisis, when you're involved in a troubling time, is the greatest opportunity to achieve. So we're building this leadership academy in Illinois, and my focus, my greatest goal is to target the youngest professionals. Those folks that are just coming out of college in their first 3 to 5 years in their professional life, because that's our future. And I don't care what organization or what line of work you're in, you should be focused on developing leaders. If you feel like you have something to learn on leadership, go out and buy a book. There's hundreds and thousands of them out there on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, but we have to do a better job at developing leaders. Leaders recognize that it's all about the people. All of us, this is one of the statements in our guiding principles at the Northbrook Park District, is we recognize that all of us are better than any one of us. I certainly recognize that I make mistakes every day. And the more I listen and engage my staff and our stakeholders throughout our community, the better decisions I'm going to make. To build a great place to work, you need to develop leaders. Already touched on that. So we're going to transition now into culture. So very simply, culture is the way people function together. Essentially, it's the backbone of the organization. It's reflected in how performance issues are dealt with, how mistakes are dealt with, how information is shared, how are decisions made, how are resources allocated, how is conflict treated and addressed. Going back to that very first slide that had the reference to the book, So You're in Charge, Now What? So I read that book before I started in Northbrook. I was offered the job in January. As I said, I started April 1st. I read the book, and one of the things the board had shared with me going through the negotiation process is, there was this morale issue at the district. And morale was, in their eyes, in the tank. And for those of you, how my board is set up, I have 7 elected board members. So it's a volunteer position. They're not paid. They're not in the office every day. They have jobs outside. Their real engagement with the Park District is a couple of meetings a month where they come in at night and we talk about issues and those kinds of things. So they're not really immersed in the day-to-day culture of the organization. But this is what they heard. And this is what the recruitment agency, they went and interviewed staff and did some focus groups and put together a profile. And they said, the morale's really in the tank at this organization, and we don't know why. So one of the things you're going to be charged with when you come in April 1st is you got to find out what the deal is here and why it is the way it is. Well, I can tell you a couple of things that I learned immediately. So how is information shared? So I get offered this job in January. I immediately call the executive director who's retiring, and I say, I'd like your last 6 months of financial reports, and I want to now be included in any communication that's sent out to the board and sent out to the staff from you. So I can start seeing how things are communicated. Well, a couple days later, I get this FedEx envelope that's about this big, and inside of it is the financial report, and it was printed on a dot matrix printer. First red flag. I'm trying to read through this thing. I'm like, oh my God. How is anyone going to figure out where the organization is at? Now, this is a AAA bonded agency, one of only 7 or 8 in the entire state of Illinois, has close to $10 million in surplus funds, and from the outside is looked at as one of the best organizations from a public parks and recreation standpoint in the state of Illinois. I start looking at the communications that go out. There's a weekly briefing that's sent out. And I start reading the weekly briefing. And like the third line down is so-and-so cut 255 payable checks this week. So-and-so met with so-and-so to talk about CPR classes coming up. And there's like 12 pages of this. And I'm thinking in my head, who cares? Who wants to know this stuff? Nobody wants to know this stuff. It doesn't add value. It doesn't lead to improved performance. It's garbage. So that's before I even start. I start with the district, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. But I told the board, give me 3 months. Give me 90 days. In 90 days, I'll assess the organization, and I'll come back and I'll tell you what I think. So 3 days after I start, I do a presentation to all the staff, and I just say, here's a little bit about who Rick Hanetho is. And I basically said a couple of things. I said, don't be offended when I ask why, because I'm going to ask why a lot. And over the next 3 months, I'm here to look, listen, and learn. That's it. Not going to come in and make any rash decisions. I'm not going to come in and blow the organization up. I'm going to come here for the next 3 months. I'm going to look, listen, and learn. I'm going to go to the board. I'm going to tell them what I see, and I'm going to come back to you, and I'm going to tell you what I see. And then we're going to start developing our plan. And that's basically what we did. So I want to talk a little bit about two cultures. The first is a culture of entitlement. And I will tell you that looking back on the last 3.5 years, this pretty effectively describes what I and what we have been through in Northbrook. And there may be some things in this that you see that are similar to your work culture. So first of all, one of the folks in the back of the room mentioned chaotic. And chaotic can be a good thing. I mean, chaotic can be energetic and exciting and lots going on and, you know, multiple tasks and things like that. I can tell you in the Northbrook Park District, it was chaotic in a bad way. Low morale and trust. Morale absolutely was in the tank. It was horrible. There was a great deal of fear. Who's this new guy? What's he going to do? Minimal communication and teamwork. And when I use the word communication, please understand, when I talk about communication, I'm talking about communication that makes a difference for the organization. Communication that leads to improved results. Communication that adds value to internal and external customers. Not the 95 to 97% of communication that goes on every single day in every organization across the country that is absolutely 100% meaningless to what you're trying to accomplish as a business. Silos. After I got over my initial hump, I went out and I did roundtable discussions with each of the divisions of our organization, and it was basically just for me to sit and journal. So I asked a lot of questions, and I just took it in. And one of the things I heard all the time is, well, over here at the Sports Center, which is our indoor ice arena, we do it like this. I said, oh, okay, well, how do they do it at the golf course? Well, I don't know how they do it, but this is how we do it. And that was inherent in every aspect of our organization. Our theater, our leisure center, our golf operation, our ice skating rink. Heck, between hockey and figure skating, it was we versus them. Finance versus marketing, marketing versus finance, parks maintenance versus recreation, recreation versus park maintenance. The only thing, there was no we, unless you were talking about your little bubble, your little silo. And there was a tremendous resistance to change. One of the things I got after about 6 months, it was about 6 months, we did an employee opinion survey. And some of the comments that came back, and I knew they were directed at me, but it's like, why do we have to change? Before we change, why don't you learn more about why we've done it a certain way for the last 25 years? And one of my little credos, and I actually heard it at Athletic Business many, many years ago, the guy, Gary Ebershoff, it's your ship. He's a Navy guy. He was a keynote speaker here. I don't know if any of you are here. But one of the things he talked about in his presentation is always start with the mindset that you can get better. No matter how good you are, always start with the mindset that you can get better. So that was part of my mantra in Northbrook, is this isn't personal. This is how do we as an organization get better. But there was a tremendous resistance to change. When conflicts arose, they were generally based on personality. It was attack the person, not attack the issue. That guy over in finance, he's nothing but a rotten dirty. He hasn't looked out for me in 20 years. So what's the problem here? Is there an issue that we need to resolve that's going to help the organization? I had a situation with it might have been athletic business that I was coming back from. And one of the inherent personality conflicts within the organization when I started is the assistant executive director was the other finalist for the job. So there was an internal candidate. So first day I walk in, the guy that I beat out for the job, who had worked there for almost 20 years, was my new assistant executive director. So there was, let's just say that there was a little passive-aggressive stuff maybe going on. So I come back from Athletic Business Conference, and it's the first time I had spent money on the Park District dollar, and I never was trained on how to go about getting reimbursed. You know, I had some personal expenses, some things I charged on the Park District card, and so I gave it to my administrative assistant, and I said, submit this stuff to finance to get me reimbursed. So a couple days later, my assistant comes in, and she's got an envelope with a Post-it note, and the Post-it note says, perhaps the executive director should follow procedure 0-1-4-9 or something like that. And I'm like, oh, really? So where do I find this procedure? Nobody ever trained me. So I'm pointed to this brown 3-ring binder that's like this thick, and there's papers falling out of it and all this stuff, and I'm like, all right. So I've been really nice. I haven't, you know, I've been look, listen, learn. I, you know, haven't really come down on anyone, so I go, I'm going to find procedure, blah, 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 and I'm going to follow it to the letter of the law. So I diligently worked on this project, and it took me about 3 hours. And I got it done. So I turned it in the nice way. And I attached a memo to it. And I just said, so-and-so, I have now followed procedure blah, 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 blah. And it has taken me blah, 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 including my administrative assistant's time, which was blah, 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 blah. So now, following your procedure that was last updated in 1991, it has been a net loss to the Northbrook Park District of $43 to get my reimbursement of like $40. One of the things you'll hear me talk about in a little while is called an interaction agreement. And I have some copies up here, and again, if you want one of these, I don't have enough, I'd be happy to send it to you. But one of the things we put together in the last year is an interaction agreement that outlines how our team works with each other. And one of the things that's prevalent in our interaction agreements is any time conflict arises within our organization, you have to attack the issue and not the person. Poor performance is accepted and tolerated, and a lack of direction. I will tell you that the culture that I walked into in Northbrook, not only was poor performance tolerated, in some ways it was endorsed. It just wasn't, nobody even looked at it. The first couple performance issues I came up with, within the first week, I asked our HR person, I want all the performance appraisals of all the senior leadership team for the last 5 years. Got the files. There weren't any appraisals in there. The leader of the organization was not even appraising his staff. So I started experiencing some personnel issues. So I started digging a little deeper. Right about when I started on April 1st, performance appraisals were due May 1st. So I asked every appraisal for a full-time employee in the organization had to be routed through me. I wanted to read them. In one of the divisions, I had to keep asking until August to get them. When I started looking at some of the other divisions, what they simply did is cut and paste from the prior year. Same goals, same comments. One of the employees who we ended up terminating about 3 months after I started, it was absolutely, completely appalling what was put in this individual's performance appraisal and what was happening in reality on a day-to-day basis. To the point where there was potential for criminal activity. This individual worked in our IT area. The individual had basically downloaded all of the key administrators, the senior leadership team, the HR person, and my profile on his computer so he could monitor our activities on a day-to-day basis. And this individual, when you looked at the performance appraisals, great job. Bang-up job. Got a few shortcomings, but overall he's doing a great job. It's horrible. So in many organizations, you know, especially a culture of entitlement, is people just don't pay attention to performance. You know, there's an old line my old boss from Carroll Stream used to use, Arnie Biondo. In fact, he's down here at the conference. You know, that old line of good enough for government. Well, I'll tell you one thing. You work at the Northbrook Park District, that's not acceptable. It's not good enough for government. Status quo is the way to go. You know, why change? We've been doing it great for, you know, if it's not broke, why break it? And one of the things that was inherent is oftentimes what I find in a culture of entitlement is the focus of the people that work in the organization is on what they do. And many of you in this room have been asked from time to time, well, what do you do for a living? Well, this is what I do. You know, it's a common question. And oftentimes in our organization, we get in a rut of thinking about what we do, the transactions, the processes. But what's important, and if you want to move to a great work culture in a great organization, the focus should be on how you do what you do and why you do what you do. One of the issues I've been dealing with recently, we've come a long way in Northbrook. We've come a long way. But we're not anywhere close to being where we need to be. Unfortunately, I'll pick on finance again for a little bit. In the last couple of months, I'll get these things called ITs. So we have a purchase order, and we have a certain levels of purchasing authority for different levels of staff, and that's followed to the letter. So I'll sign off on purchase orders I need to. Well, then the check gets cut, and all of a sudden I get this little orange folder. And I hate when I see that orange folder in my inbox because I know it's going to make me mad. So I'll get this orange folder, and my assistant kind of comes in and puts it in my inbox, and she scurries out before I talk to her. But in that orange folder that comes out of finance is this thing called ITs. And what kills me is the purchase order's there, which I signed and approved. The check, or a copy of the check, is stapled to the front of the purchase order. And the check has my signature on it. And then there's the IT. So the check's been mailed out, the purchase order's been approved, and now they're at one of the finance staff, one staff person, feels it's important that I sign the IT. Purchase order's approved, check's out, my name on it. Now they're asking me to sign the IT. I said last week in a management team meeting, I said, I'm sorry if I'm violating some kind of fundamental accounting principle that I'm not aware of. I'll gladly sign these, but I'm not signing them anymore unless someone tells me I have to. And our finance director's like, oh my, she's relatively new. She's only been with us a little less than a year, and she's dynamite. She's like, God, I'm so sorry. You should never have to sign one of those. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. It adds no value. So the focus should be on how and why. So basically, a culture of entitlement is a highly dysfunctional mess. So I did the little exercise you guys did on use 3 words to describe your work culture. That would describe what I walked into in Northbrook. A highly dysfunctional mess. Now we'll talk a little bit, transition into what leads to a better culture. I have another book. So one of the things when I'm faced with a problem is a lot of times I'll try to find a book or find an expert that I can learn from. So I happened to go to Barnes & Noble shortly after I started in Northbrook, and I just accidentally came across this title, Creating the Accountable Organization, A Practical Guide to Improve Performance Execution by Mark Samuel. I read this book in about 2 days, and I was like, oh my God, this guy worked for the Northbrook Park District. I mean, it was like reading a case study of what I was living every day, and I said, this is so cool. I immediately bought like 50 of the books. I brought them to work. We divided all of our full-time staff into teams of about 6 or 7 employees, and we said, you have one assignment. You have 2 months to read part 1 of the book, and we're going to come together as a group, and we're going to talk about it. So each team had to do a presentation to the rest of our staff on what they learned in the first part of the book. And it's something that we've used throughout our growth and evolution in Northbrook. In fact, the idea for the interaction agreements for our staff came directly out of that book. Great, great tool for building accountability in a positive work culture in an organization. So we're going to look now at what are some of the traits that come in an organization and culture that's based on accountability. As I just said, it's not what you do, it's how, the attitude and passion you bring to work, and why, the impact and outcomes of how you do it. You know, we talk a lot about that in Illinois with our park districts, and I certainly talk a lot about this with our staff, is we have an absolutely incredible story to tell. The impact we have on people's lives every day, from little children to senior citizens, no other form of social service or public sector employment has that kind of impact. Yet we don't do a good job of telling people our story. And I don't care if you work in the fitness industry or military recreation or whatever your job is, what's your story? Because it's not what you do, it's why you do it. And what impact and what outcomes you produce through your day-to-day efforts. So what does a culture of accountability look like? First and foremost, there's clear direction. High communication and flow of information. That flow of information is still an absolute work in progress for us, because my feeling is we have to somehow figure out an effective way to filter out the junk that we're bombarded with on a day-to-day basis and focus on communicating what adds value to our staff, what puts them in a better position to be successful and effective, and the same thing goes for our external customer. How do we more effectively meet our customers' needs on a day-to-day basis when they're being bombarded with messages from every angle possible? Decisions are made at all levels without fear. One of the things that we talk about a lot is we should embrace and reward mistakes. As long as they're not, just, dumb mistakes. But if somebody makes a mistake by trying to be innovative and creative, we learn from that. Mistakes are our greatest opportunity to learn, and if you embrace that as a culture, you eliminate fear. Collaboration and collective problem solving is basically a huge part of our culture. That when we're faced with an issue, we try to get as many stakeholders involved in the decision making as possible. Unless it's a confidential personnel matter that you simply can't engage a significant portion of the workforce. But if we're faced with an issue with regards to a program, service, or challenge within our organization related to a process or a system in place, we'll get a group together to fix it. It's boundaryless. We talked about the silos and the little barriers. It's what we do, or what you try to do in an accountable culture, is it's cross-functional. There are no boundaries. We have several work teams in our organization. We have an environmental team, a customer appreciation team, a customer relations team, and they're basically our work committees. We have an employee team, and those groups are all cross-functional. So they have representation from marketing, they have representation from HR, they have representation from finance, golf, leisure services, and they work on strategic initiatives within our organization. But we try very hard to eliminate that we versus they mentality. Poor performance is addressed. Organizational alignment and performance is monitored and measured consistently. I mentioned interaction agreements are in place. We have an ongoing commitment to developing leaders, and a purposeful and innovative people strategy in place. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. The one thing I do want to mention on those last couple of bullet points has to do with performance, or poor performance, being addressed. This evolution that my organization has experienced, and if you go through this journey in your own organization, I want to be real clear that it's certainly not easy. It's exceptionally rewarding, but it's not easy. And we talked about confronting the brutal facts. I can tell you we have had a significant amount of turnover. People that had worked in that culture of entitlement for so long they didn't have the capacity to grow beyond that. So as you deal with taking an organization from entitlement to accountable, you set clear expectations. You set clear direction. You put performance measures in place. We laugh a little bit in our organization about the fact that we absolutely want to have fun, and I'm right there at the front of the line when it comes to having fun, but they call it work for a reason. You know, you have to deliver results. And if you don't deliver results, what are we paying you for? So, you know, we have consistently had to face performance issues, and we have had to make some exceptionally difficult decisions. One of the most difficult for me personally had to do with the assistant executive director, who is a really, really good person, a person of integrity, a person committed to the organization, a person that wanted to do a good job, a person that lived in the community, a person that many of the board members wanted to hire to become the next executive director. And I had to make that decision, a guy that's in his 50s, kids at college, and I had to tell him, you got to move on. Not an easy decision. But for the rest of the organization, if they look at the person that's supposed to be leading all of them, and that person that's leading all of them isn't willing to confront the brutal facts and make the difficult decisions related to one of his direct reports, why should I do it? So, performance issues, if there's one thing, you can't accept mediocrity. It may be someone you like, it may be someone you've worked with for many, many, many years, but you got to do it. What's right for the organization? Okay, we talk about an innovative people strategy, and we're just working on developing our HR culture in our organization. We just brought on a new HR person, and one of the things we've talked about as a strategic initiative in our organization is oftentimes what I've found in my experience is HR is all about compliance. It's all about filling out the right forms. It's all about getting the insurance stuff correct. It's all about making sure that all the little protocol issues are dealt with. And I've talked for a long time that if we're going to be effective in building the culture that we want in our organization, we got to get away from just compliance and focus on culture. How do we build an environment that truly supports the well-being and the success of our people? Because oftentimes managers or leaders are not necessarily experts on building culture when you talk about a global level. So we use this little model in our organization with our HR initiatives that we're talking about the full employee life cycle, from recruitment to hiring to, using a good to great analogy, getting on the bus or onboarding orientation, to training and professional development, to performance appraisals, to succession planning, which is really leadership development. How do we continue to build a pipeline of talent so when someone does leave our organization, hopefully we have a ready-made, talented leader that we can move into that slot. So succession planning to getting off the bus to recruitment again. That throughout that employee life cycle, our strategic plan, our mission, our vision, our guiding principles, our interaction agreements, our culture is messaged and delivered at every level of that process. So when you sit down and you're putting your recruitment pamphlet together, it's one of the great ideas that I got from a book I'll share towards the end of the presentation. But and I have the business written down in my journal. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but I'll make sure I cite the source. But they moved away from job descriptions and called them responsibility statements. And they weren't job descriptions written by management, they were responsibility statements written by a collaborative group of employees. And so when we're recruiting staff, we're working towards this. We're not there yet, but when we're recruiting employees, it's already started. That our culture is already embedded in the recruitment process. Hiring, we've gone to, the mantra is hire tough. And every full-time position we hire for is a team-based interview process with cross-functional teams. So if you're hiring someone in marketing, you're going to have people from parks, golf, maintenance, senior leadership, managers. It's cross-functional. So we hire tough. The onboarding process when I started, my orientation, there was no orientation. Here's your office. The guy that was retiring stayed on for 6 weeks. I worked with him, but he took me around and introduced me to people in the community. There was no orientation. So it's basically breaking down each of these steps in the employee life cycle and embedding your mission, vision, guiding principles, strategic plan. What is the culture you want to create in your organization? So developing and creating an innovative people strategy is really, really important. So we're going to transition into our last area, strategy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the steps we went through. First is the 360-degree assessment. And this is something that I did, and again, don't worry about writing all these down because I will absolutely get you the handout on this. But before I started, I sent out this aligning expectations questionnaire to the entire full-time staff. And basically asked them to complete this and get it back to me. So I had a little bit of a baseline when I started. You can do this at any point in your organization. It doesn't have to be before you start. You can do it when you go home after this conference. But what are the 5 most important things about the Northbrook Park District you want to preserve and why? What are the 3 most pressing priorities that we face today? What are the top 3 things we need to change and why? What do you most hope I do? What are you most concerned I might do? What are you concerned I might not do? What is your most important tool for figuring out what your customers want? What advice do you have for me? And anything else you would like to discuss or ask me? And you want to talk about a telling process. Now, if you're already working in the organization and you're gathering this information, it's going to tell you one thing. For me, asking for this to be completed before I started, I sent it to all my board members and I sent it to all the full-time staff. The first thing that was very telling is who completed it and who didn't. 2 of my senior leadership team members didn't complete the form or the questionnaire. You didn't have the time to pull it together? No. No, the first individual was gone about 3 months after I started, and the second one was the assistant executive director who eventually moved on. But yeah, that tells you a story. I mean, if you're a leader in an organization, and you don't have to necessarily be the administrator, but if you're the leader of a team in your group, and you ask them to complete something that you're asking them, how can I be better for you? How can I be better for you? And they're not willing to complete that exercise, there's a real good chance they're stuck in that entitlement mentality. And one of the things that I've learned about empowerment and about leadership is, that line, it's all about you, but not at all about you. If any time you're in a position as a leader to ask for feedback from your customers, your stakeholders, your direct reports, what more could they ask for? I want to put you in a position to be more successful. This came directly out of that book, so you're in charge, now what? So I can't take credit for creating this little tool, but I'm telling you what, that exercise alone that I pulled out of that $13 book set me on the path to an exceptionally successful first 90 days at the Northbrook Park District. Because when I went in at 3 months, my commitment to the park board was to go in after 3 months and give them a full assessment of the organization. And let me tell you what, you want to talk about having a pit in your stomach about leadership and doing what's right. Going into closed session at that board meeting and doing the presentation to basically say that the organization, that they were the board of directors, your organization is a dysfunctional, horrible mess. But I'll tell you what, I wasn't gonna lie to them. I was gonna confront the brutal facts and tell them the God's honest truth from my perspective as the person they hired to lead the organization. This place is a mess. And you know what? We're gonna fix it. But I have to know that you're gonna give me the support and means necessary to do it, because you're not always gonna like what I tell you. Going back to him a couple months later and telling him that we're going to have to fire our IT guy because he's doing some things that are borderline criminal. There was a lot of messy things we had to deal with. But I'll tell you, after I did that presentation, the board, to a person, 7 of them, said, "Oh my God, that's the first time since sitting on this board that I feel like someone really told us the God's honest truth." Meant a huge amount to me, because being a brand new executive director, never being in that position before, feeling confident about my own abilities, but still being a little unsure. You want to talk about earning a level of trust? I walked out of that room that night and I thought, they trust me. They trust me. Now I got to do everything in my power to earn the trust of every person in this organization, because if I do, then they're going to buy into what we're doing and where we're going. And again, I want to stress, we're not there yet. We got a whole heck of a lot to do, but we're getting there. So this tool is absolutely dynamite, and you can use it at any time in your organization. And going back to that personal thing, you can use this with your family. You know, you can use it. A couple other things that I did, I mentioned this earlier. After I completed the Aligning Expectations questionnaire, I went out and did roundtable discussions. And I still try to do this about once every 6 months or once a year, where I'll go out to the different divisions without my senior leadership team, so without my direct reports, and it's just basically an interaction. You know, where are we at? You know, where are we at with regards to the strategic plan? Are there things about the organization that we're not sharing that you'd like to hear from me? You know, what do we need to do? How do we get better? I have a consistent, every quarterly full-time staff meeting, I mentioned to every single employee, if you want to get together for coffee or lunch, just to talk, I'm open. Let's do it. And I've had about a half dozen people take me up on that, but it's basically an opportunity to just listen. So that was very productive for us. The past, present, and future, you have to really understand the playing field. And that sounds like common sense, but I'll tell you what, the organization I went to, the Park District, was formed in 1927. And in its history, they didn't hire their first executive director until, I think, 1960. And there's only been 3 executive directors in the history of the district. I'm the 3rd. First guy, 36 years, and then the guy that retired that I took over for was 11 years, so now me. I mean, you want to talk about history. Northbrook's about 34,000 people, but I swear to God, it's like Mayberry. And I live in a different community, so I commute, so there's a little bit of that. Well, he's not a resident. How can he lead this organization? Well, I'll tell you, it's like, I swear to God, it's like Mayberry. You drive down the street, and you know, they're, hey, Rick, how are you? You know, so it's very, very important for me to immerse myself and make sure I truly understand the playing field and the players, because they're all interconnected. Well, I won't get into that story. I'll save that one. We'd run out of time. And the last one is, you guys have all heard this, the SWOT analysis. You've probably, at some point in your career, used this tool. I can tell you it's exceptionally beneficial. We did it with our senior leadership team about 6 months ago, and that our strategic plan was finalized and launched in July of 2010. So about a year after, so it was a little less than a year, and last April, so in April of 2011, I took our senior leadership team off-site, and we went through a SWOT analysis. And I didn't participate. I facilitated the process. I had my own notes on what I thought were our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but I wanted to see if we were aligned as a senior leadership team in our thoughts. Thankfully, our senior leadership team saw it almost identically how I did, so it helped a great deal in me formulating my work plan for the new fiscal year. Our fiscal year started May 1. So we did that in April. I prepared my work plan off of that. It was so successful that we decided to do it as an entire organization, and about 2 weeks ago, we facilitated a SWOT analysis for our entire full-time staff. Again, I didn't participate, our senior leadership team didn't participate. We facilitated the discussion for the rest of the staff to see if the rest of the staff was aligned with what senior leadership and what I saw. And thankfully, we got very, very similar feedback. But how we're going to use this tool, and I'll get into that in a little bit, is how we develop our department, division, and individual work plans, and my work plan that's ultimately aligned and linked with our strategic plan. So we use that SWOT analysis as a tool to build basically our goals and objectives and our work plans for the year. So again, that places that level of accountability that no matter where you sit in the organization, not only do you know what's expected of you, but you know what's expected of your team and the organization. So everyone is on the same page with regards to where the organization is going. So two additional things that we did internally with our internal stakeholders. In the fall of 2008, we did an employee opinion survey. And at the time, that goes back to that morale issue that I talked about. We hired the Management Association of Illinois to come in and facilitate an employee opinion survey. Did the survey, great results. A lot of it confirmed what the board was concerned about, that there was morale issues. There was talk about a lack of accountability. We learned a lot from that survey, and we committed that with the employee opinion survey, we would then do that every 3 years. So we actually, the Management Association of Illinois employee opinion survey is still open today at our office in Northbrook, and we'll be getting the results from them in January. So now we'll have benchmark data that shows from 2008 to 2011 how effective have we been with regards to building our culture and earning trust with our employees. In addition to that, and I have it resourced in further in the presentation, we decided to add a second employee opinion survey, and some of you may have heard of this, but it's based on the Great Place to Work Institute, another great book. They put out a list of the 100 best places to work in America for Fortune 500 companies. They also do a best places to work list for small and medium-sized companies. It would be one of our goals over the course of the next couple of years that someday you'll see the Northbrook Park District on that list. Not there yet, but we're doing their internal trust index survey, and that survey is going on right now with our staff as well. So we've taken an active approach to asking our employees what is the culture within the organization. So we did that. The other thing that we've done is we put together internal satisfaction surveys. And I'm a firm believer from a leadership perspective that you build a successful, great place to work from the inside out. If you're not good on the inside, you can't be good on the outside. So I worked very hard in the first year that I was there to look at the internal makeup of the organization. And this is something I felt very strongly in. And thankfully, as we went through the turmoil of making the change with our IT staff, we brought on an IT dynamo. And this guy was able to put these surveys together and facilitate them in a very, very efficient, thorough, and functional way. So we put these surveys together, and we had them consistent by support department. We had one for human resources, finance, risk management, IT, marketing and communications, and maintenance. And in the first year, some of you may not be able to see this very well, but basically the target internal customer satisfaction index is between 88 and 95% is where we want to be. That's our target. So this is the first time we'd ever done this. It was orchestrated in the, I believe, the fall of 2009. And as you can see, our internal satisfaction was abysmal. IT, 42% satisfaction rate. Marketing, 54% satisfaction rate. Accounting and finance, 59%. HR, 60%. And risk management, 78%. We purposely decided not to include parks the first year because we're going through some real transition and turmoil. But I don't know about you, but that certainly communicates some pretty clear marching orders. And this is just the total results. As you drill down into the survey, what we did is, in technology, we identified all the critical processes in IT. In HR, we identified all the critical processes within HR, and so on and so forth. And then staff rated us based on how we deliver to our internal customers based on those processes. And that's the overall satisfaction. So what's pleasing from a leadership standpoint and a culture building standpoint is where we are today. So the yellow line is 2010, and the blue line is our surveys we just completed about 3 weeks ago internally, is 2011. IT is now at 99%. Marketing is at 84%. Not quite at our target of 88, but certainly significantly better than before. Accounting has actually dipped, and I'll touch on that in a minute. Parks is at 93%. Risk management dipped a little bit to 76, and I'll touch on that. And HR is up to 82. So we've met our goal of 88 to 95 and exceeded it in IT. We're there with parks. We got a little work to do in marketing and HR, but we're definitely making progress. Some really, really clear, tangible data that we can work with to set priorities, develop work plans, and identify goals and performance measures for the coming year on how we continue to build the culture of a great place to work. Now, the finance situation, the new finance director that I referred to earlier, she was mortified when she saw this. I expected those results. In the last year, we transitioned from the old dot matrix printer. We got a new accounting software package. The transition has been a nightmare. Beyond nightmare. And our new business manager and our finance director have had to invest an incredible amount of time and resources to get it right. And in doing so, we did not get monthly financial reports. Our staff was, in a way, operating blind. Our board had to trust us to get it right. Now, the one interesting thing about this, while we dipped to 56%, when you look at trust in accounting, it's gone through the roof. So trust is way up, but satisfaction is way down. Now, what better of a marching order for the finance director and me, who trust the finance director without any doubt? Hey, the board trusts you and the staff trusts you. But now this year, you got to get it right. Because if we see we dip next year, then we got some problems. With risk management, a situation with our risk manager, we had a very difficult personnel issue with one of our managers in parks maintenance who the risk manager supervised. This individual was out on workman's comp claims, and it was just a really difficult year. Then we had some additional turnover with staff, and then the risk manager was actually promoted to our parks operation manager. So we really didn't have a good focus in risk management this year. We basically backburnered their initiatives. Their work plan was put on hold. It was a conscious decision that pretty much everyone in the organization was aware of. So it's not surprising that their satisfaction scores actually came down a little bit. But now, again, We just had a presentation by the individual, Chris Sharp, and one of our other employees that works very closely with the Risk Management Committee, did a presentation on what the initiatives and work plan for risk management looks for the coming year. And we're on target, we're on track. It's transparent, it's communicated to the entire district, and we should see those numbers spike. Now I'll tell you, I thought this was like this process of making the internal satisfaction surveys part of our annual, it was just something we were going to do. I thought, man, this is going to be tough. Our IT guy was able to facilitate these surveys, puts it out in SurveyMonkey, puts it out, opens it up for about 2 weeks. We get about 80% to 90% participation of our staff. He's able to collate the results within about another week. From start to finish, from survey initiation to completion with report, is about a month to do 6 internal satisfaction surveys. And again, if any of you are interested in the tool we use or how we put it together, you just need to email me or get me your business card, and I can actually put you in touch with our IT guy, and he can show you the survey. But when you talk about performance management and building a culture of accountability and creating an environment where everyone is on the same page as far as what's expected of them and how do we add value to our customers on an internal basis, just a dynamite tool. Now we'll transition a little bit. We got about a little less than 10 minutes, so I'm going to work towards wrapping this up. You also need to look at external feedback. I know this is very hard to read, so I'll just read this to you. But one of the critical things that we accomplished was doing a community interest and opinion survey. And basically there's a company, Leisure, if Ron Vine was here, he'd hate me. But the guy's name is Ron Vine. He's in Topeka, Kansas. If you want his information, I'd be happy to get it to you. But Ron has done over 600 needs assessments throughout the country. He's the best there is in the business. So we hired him. We wanted to know externally, what does the public really think about the Northbrook Park District? So in the summer of 2009, we executed our community survey, and this is just one example of the results. The primary unmet needs that the community identified, that Park District, if you're going to spend our tax dollars to improve our park system, here's what we want you to do. We want you to build an indoor fitness facility. We want an indoor track. We want an indoor pool. We want better walking and biking trails. We want an off-leash dog park. And we want indoor sports courts. So if you're going to spend our tax dollars, those are the primary things we want you to focus on. There were also questions on what's your satisfaction level of our programs? What's your satisfaction level of our parks? So we now have in much the same as the internal satisfaction surveys, we now have an internal benchmark or an external benchmark on what our community thinks about us. Now we're in the process, and I'm saddened to say that our external feedback system is still a little bit in its infancy as far as how we gather and process feedback from our users, our customers, on a consistent basis. I showed you the results of the internal satisfaction. We just now are getting the data to establish our customer satisfaction index for our external customer. We're just in our infancy. We've gotten we have a tool we use for all of our programs now. We're looking at secret shopper programs and a number of other things, but it's still in its infancy. Definitely part of our strategic plan and our initiatives going forward. So, strategic foundation. Talked about this. When I started at the Northbrook Park District, there was no strategic plan. There was no vision. There was a mission statement that was written in 1990 that had never been updated. So one of the first things we did is look at where we need to take the organization through the strategic planning process. And the first thing is, let's talk about the mission of the district, let's talk about the vision, where we want to go, and let's talk about our guiding principles. So this is what we came up with. And the mission, when I talked earlier in the presentation about making it real, the mission really defines the fundamental purpose of why you exist as an organization. And I have our strategic plan, a few copies up here, along with our guiding principles. Again, if you want this stuff, I'll get it to you. Mission, to enhance our community by providing outstanding services, parks, and facilities through environmental, social, and financial stewardship. How many of you have heard of the triple bottom line? A few of you. The triple bottom line is the latest rage in corporate America. Fortune 500 companies all talk about the triple bottom line. That means how we contribute to the environmental well-being of the people we serve, or the area in which our business is located. Social stewardship is huge in the private sector now. And financial stewardship. Now granted, in the private sector, your financial motives are to make money. In the public service, which is where I work, is to basically be good stewards to the community's resources. Any money we make goes right back into our park system, and we generate about $11 million a year in earned revenue. So our mission is basically to be good environmental stewards, good social stewards, and good financial stewards. If we do that well, we will be successful. It is embedded in every decision and everything we do as an organization. It's why we exist. Our vision is to be recognized as a national leader in delivering innovative park and recreation services based on responsiveness, trust, and accountability to our community. It's one of the reasons when I got hired by the board, I said, will you support me going out and speaking because I love doing it? They said yes. Part of the reason I do this is because I want to be the best. I want to be the best for me and for the people I serve and I work with. I want people to say, hey, if you want to find out something innovative or something forward-thinking, call the Northbrook Park District because they really got it going on. I want to be a national leader. I want our staff to feel like they're a leader. So when you talk about vision, where do you want to be in 5 years? It's one of those questions we laid out there. Not just your organization, but where do you want to be? When my son talked to me on Monday night, I was like, damn, I got to be doing something right. At his sports banquet this last month, he plays football. The most heartfelt thing was not how he did on the field, and he did well. But his sophomore coach came up to me and he said, you know what, you raised a really good kid. And that was really cool. But vision defines where you want to be in 5 years. I was in for a little bit of the last session, and the speaker talked about personal mission and vision statements. Do you have one? If you don't, dedicate some time to doing it. I'm doing a session Saturday morning that talks a lot about personal leadership and personal growth. Make this stuff real. Guiding principles. I won't read those to you. I have a bunch of our guiding principles up here, and again, there's probably not enough for anyone. If you go on the Northbrook Park District website, you can download the strategic plan and our guiding principles. But we have our guiding principles listed, but then we also include statements that kind of reinforce the behaviors. Core values and guiding principles in an organization really define the behaviors that it takes to achieve the vision and mission. So work on doing that. Actually, one of the exercises that I'll hand out on Saturday in the session I'm doing is on setting your own personal values. What are your core values as an individual? So we completed our strategic plan in 2010. We completed division, department, and individual work plans in 2010 that are aligned with our strategic plan. As I mentioned earlier, we have the 2 internal satisfaction surveys going on right now. We'll have the results shortly after the first of the year. In early 2012, we will be launching a follow-up community survey that will hopefully validate or reconfirm what the primary unmet needs are in our community. These are all things that you can do within your organization. Very, very important to help build that culture of transparency, the culture that clearly defines where you're going and what your priorities are. And the last thing that I'll leave you with is this whole essence of telling our story. I brought a video that I won't have time to show you, but you can find it on our website. We're launching a whole campaign about telling our story. And those of us, we all work with people. We all work with people in a way to improve their quality of life. And every single person in this room has an incredible story to tell. Don't be afraid to tell it. We sell the emotional, social benefits of recreation, fitness, quality of life. Figure out a way to tell your story. So coming full circle, take some time to look at those questions again at some point this weekend and take some time trying to answer them. I put my email address up here. It's rhanetho@nbparks.org. Again, that's rhanetho@nbparks.org. If there's anything about the presentation that you would like to have access to or would find beneficial, I promise I will get that to you. Also, as I mentioned, I have some PowerPoints, some business cards up here that might help if you need them. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great conference and be good.